and welcome to the first edition of the Targets in Focus for this trading week. Today's FX pairs in focus are the Euro Dollar, the Euro Pound and the Euro Swedish Krona. Joining me now to discuss these pairs alongside general views on the FX market ahead of key events this week is Anders Eklof, Chief FX Strategist at Swedbank in Stockholm. Anders, thank you very much for joining me. Now, before we go on to discuss several G10 currencies in more detail, it's a busy week for financial markets with several key events, both political and economical. How much will the outcomes of these week's events shape up or shake up the FX market?
According to my opinion, we have a lot of events risk this week. As you mentioned, we have US election, we have vote on austerity measures in Greece and ECB, Bank of England, etc. The problem is that it doesn't really matter what outcome we get from the US election. We still have a lot of uncertainty in FX, and we will refocus quite fast on this fiscal cliff issue and the upcoming Catalonian election, also the regional election in Spain. So there's plenty of reasons to expect us to continue trade event risk, and I'm not sure we are going to get a much clearer picture after this week.
In that case, what currency pairs do you think may prove to be particularly interesting this week?
Obviously, euro dollar. The dollar is bid now, going into a major event risk. If we would, by any chance or risk, get anything worrying from Greece, euro dollar will be sold heavily, of course, and there's also Spanish auction later in the week. So I think a lot of focus on the euro dollar here. Obviously, euro yen, which is the measure of risk in the currency market, and perhaps a little bit focus also on the Bank of England, on their rate decision, if they're going to add any QE or not.
In that case, if we start with the trader's favourite pair, the euro dollar, given a combination of events on the horizon, what scenarios have you built your latest euro dollar forecast on in the short, mid and long term?
Actually, what we are believing is that we see some downside risk to our 129 1 euro dollar forecast here. We've had for quite a long time now some downside forecast in euro dollar, and that's based on the relative macro. The macro looks very weak in Europe, while if we get past any austerity due to the fiscal cliff, which I think we will do in the last minute, then there is actually a case for a little bit stronger US macro going into next year. So euro dollar downside is our major strategic call if you go a little bit further out.
Looking at your outlook for the euro pound, you're not expecting much movement from current levels for the pair. What are your reasons for this?
Yeah, well, the reason is that it's like we think it's counterbalancing effects here. We have had some better data coming out from the UK, and we might not expect more QE, as I said. Still, the outlook for the British economy is very much depending on the outlook for the European economy, and the Eurozone outlook looks poor, and we don't think that there's enough forces to shake up this 0.8 level. So we rather play it from some kind of mean reversion story here.
Okay.
Because if the pound gets more expensive, it's obviously bad for the British economy in terms of lower inflation outlook. Could be more QE down the road, and also less positive effect from the weak sterling on the net exports and so on. So we think it's a lot about counterbalancing forces that will keep this currency pair at 0.8 going forward. We don't have a strong case in any direction.
What about the Euro Swedish Krona? I understand you expect the Swedish Krona to come under pressure in the short term. Now, at its last policy meeting, Riksbank left rates unchanged but lowered its forecast for the coming months. And just looking at economic indicators and the underlying picture of a weakening economy, how concerned are you about household debt levels in Sweden? And is it now looking more likely that the repo rate will be cut come December?
The last rate decisions, when Riksbank left the rate on hold, was surrounded by this discussion about the household debt, and we think it's for the Riksbank to cut rates sharply here, we need to see a really bad scenario. That said, we believe that the Riksbank has room to cut rates at the next meeting, because the outlook for the Swedish economy is quite poor in the short term, not at least due to the situation for Swedish export companies. We are concerned about the household debt story, but we don't think it will affect the next rate cut. It's rather a story if the economy bounces. We don't think that Swedish rates can stay very low for a very long time, because then obviously the Riksbank will focus quite fast on the risks concerning the rates being too low and the potential build-up of debt among households.
In that case, Anders, what are your short, mid and long-term forecasts for the Euro-Swedish Krona?
The Euro-Swedish Krona, we have 8.75 in the very short term, up to 1 month ahead of this rate meeting. Looking past that, as we have one rate cut in our current forecast, we see some stronger krona going forward from there, back to 8.50 in 3 months and 8.40 going a little bit further out.
Thank you again, Anders, for your views on the FX market. Now, we've got a busy week in store for you on DukascopyTV, but all the latest on the US elections, the commodities market, and the Bank of England and ECB rate decisions later on in the week. So stay tuned, but for the moment, viewers, goodbye.